Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this morning's webinar brought to you by the Association of Muslim Schools. Jazakallah khair for giving up the next hour or so of your time. I know it's the end of the academic year, so it's a busy time of the year. But inshallah, this is a webinar, inshallah, you'll find very beneficial. Something obviously that's been discussed over the last 12 months and beyond, and certainly something that AMS, alhamdulillah, have been involved in with yourselves now for the best part of the last 6 or 7 months. So before we go into the actual session itself, let me just go through a few housekeeping rules. Inshallah, the session will last somewhere between 30 to 45 minutes. We can slightly stretch over if needed. I would ask that everyone remain muted throughout the session, and if you do have any questions, feel free to ask on the chat, and inshallah, Sister Shazia will moderate those questions. The majority of the questions we hope to take towards the end, as opposed to throughout the session. The event is being recorded and will be uploaded onto YouTube, onto our normal YouTube page, so watch this space. So for those who aren't familiar with the Association of Muslim Schools, and I imagine most of you are, the Association of Muslim Schools is a membership organisation representing Muslim schools across the UK. Alhamdulillah, the organisation was founded in 1992 and today represents over 100 schools, totaling over 50,000 young people. And alhamdulillah, the organisation is growing. It's one of a few organisations that are recognised by the Department for Education. We frequently participate in discussions with the DFE, and in this particular case for RSE, we've been involved in discussions with the RSE for a number of years, and alhamdulillah, it's been very fruitful for us in terms of the development of this curriculum. In terms of who's going to be covering the next this webinar, that'll be myself, Abdul Wadud Ahmed. I'm the RSE project manager, and Brother Talal Hussain, who's our RSE curriculum manager. Anybody who's jumped on any of these calls before would have heard our voices, would recognize the names. We've been involved with the wider team in this project from the outset, and inshallah between us we'll cover the content. In terms of agenda, what we hope to cover with you is a brief outline of the process. We'll get into the resources, the main part of the session, talk a little bit about access, feedback, and then a Q&A towards the end. But before I get started, just to set some expectations, the purpose of this session is not to share the entire curriculum, although that's why it's titled as. Today it's about introducing the remainder of the RSE curriculum. We previously released a portion of. We previously recorded a portion of the shared with you a portion of the curriculum. However, inshallah, we now aim to share with you the remainder of the curriculum. And alhamdulillah, something we're very proud of, having spent, like I said, the best part of the last 6 months compiling this together. So the first part I would like to just cover with you is the process. So as I mentioned, this project started off, has had certain phases to it. Phase 1 was about towards the end of the last year. It was about getting some supporting documents out to you, namely policies, auditing tools, long-term planning. This was more centered around giving you the tools that you needed to start your journey and to start engaging with various stakeholders within your organizations. We then moved on and started developing planning for the summer term. So as we understood it then was that all schools would start teaching RSE from the start of the summer term. So that was where our focus was spent. And alhamdulillah, I think it was around March we released planning for the summer term. We then swiftly moved on to focusing on developing the remainder of the planning, as I mentioned earlier, the autumn and spring term planning. And alhamdulillah, that is coming to an end, hopefully today, inshallah, with yourselves. And we can't wait to share it with you. The journey doesn't end here for us. This is something that we hope and we pray that we can influence and shape moving forward. It's been very fruitful, our involvement so far, and I think a lot of the schools who have brought in and supported this curriculum have benefited actually from the work that's being done by the team. So what we hope to do in the coming year or so is do a curriculum refresh at some stage. Like with any curriculum or any publication, you do need to gather your feedback, you do need to take a step back, and you do need to improve. And it's a cyclical process. Plan, do, check, you learn as you go. And that's certainly the approach that we've taken throughout. So watch this space and we'll keep you updated. So now I'd like to ask Brother Talal to come on and share with us the process in a little bit more detail. Over to you, Brother Talal.
Jazakallahu khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmadu wa nusalli ala rasulihil karim, amma ba'd. So in terms of the process, I've mentioned this before, we have, alhamdulillah, quite a rigorous process in terms of lesson development. We have, mashallah, a group of writers for primary and for secondary. And we have the writers have an initial discussion with me regarding the content of the lessons. So I'll be sharing with you the long-term overview and the medium-term objectives. So from the long-term overview and the medium-term objectives, we agree the lesson kind of format, the structure of the lesson, the flow of the lesson. I agree that with the writers. And then the writers produce a draft version of the lesson. And then there's a back and forth between the writers and myself where we are kind of refining the lesson. Then once the lesson is, we feel, is at, good standard, and the writers are happy with the edits that they've put in, then I do a final edit on those lessons. Then the lessons then go through our cycle. So the cycle, we have different components to the cycle. They go to the scholar check, Islamic scholar check. So the lessons go there, and there's this Islamic scholar check who will look at the Quran, the Hadith, the Islamic content, any issues that maybe the writers may have missed, or maybe the writers may have quoted something incorrectly. So that QA from an Islamic point of view is done. Then the lessons come back and are edited. Then the lessons go to pilot. So the writers and myself, we feel, okay, this lesson is a good lesson now, and is one that can be delivered in the classroom. That's all theory. So then it goes into pilot, into the schools, and the schools pilot it. Alhamdulillah, we've had over 10 schools, maybe 11, 12 schools who've piloted our lessons, a range of schools across the country. And we take the feedback from the pilots and we incorporate that feedback back into the lessons. So again, there's an editing part that takes place at that point. And then the lesson comes back to me. And at that point, we have, actually I missed a little step, we did have actually a step before the piloting. We have an initial shura check. The AMS shura have an initial check so that they feel that, okay, this lesson is in the right direction. It goes into piloting. After piloting, it comes back to me and the writers. We amend the lesson as required. Then there's a whole phase of typesetting, design, and proofreading. So we have a team for that, the typesetting, ensuring that the lessons are consistent in terms of the layout and the structure. And then the proofreaders, they go through the lessons to make sure that typos and consistency are checked. Once done, design, in terms of any design elements that need to be done. Once that's done, then the lessons come back and they go for a final AMS Shura sign-off check. AMS Shura have a check through that. Alhamdulillah, we've got very capable and very experienced AMS Shura members who are quite rigorous in the review. So they check through the content at that point, the lessons at that point. Again, any issues that raise come back. Then the proofreading team, including myself, typesetters, proofreaders, and myself, we sit down with all the lessons printed off in front of us, and we look through all the lessons for a final sweep to ensure that the consistency is there, and we may have missed anything we may have missed. We do the final sweep, and then at that point, the lessons are ready to get uploaded onto the website and then downloaded for the schools. So as Brother Abdul Wadud mentioned, really this whole process is just one phase of developing a curriculum. A curriculum really gets developed over multiple phases, and is refreshed. The feedback from the practitioners delivering is crucial. So alhamdulillah, we've had lots of real productive feedback already about the things that schools want to see, and inshallah, we can continuously adapt and improve. And hopefully, when the refresh comes along and we get your feedback, we hope that we can improve on the standard of the lessons from what they are at the moment. But alhamdulillah, for now, we've had quite a rigorous cycle, and I hope inshallah the lessons are of a good quality, and inshallah going to be able to be delivered well by the schools. Okay, Brother Abdul Wadud, we'll pass on to the next slide.
Jazakallah khair, Talal. I just wanted to add one thing, if you don't mind, to that. One of the things that we focused on in phase 2 in developing the curriculum was that we asked a few independent bodies to do critical review, as we call it, of our curriculum. And by doing so, we asked them to look at our process, to look at our material, and they gave us some very good feedback. And during this process, Talal and his team incorporated that feedback. So they really reinforced the process and the cycle that we went through. And I don't think sometimes pictorially this does it justice, but alhamdulillah, we know that we've made some improvements to the actual process itself. Okay, so moving on, over to you again, Talal, focusing on the resources. I guess this is the main part of the webinar, so I'll move on to the next slide.
Yeah, so most of you will be aware, and I think most of you have already joined the webinars and the phase 2 launch and been on the journey with us in terms of the long-term overviews. This one is for primary, and the next one is for secondary. So you just click onto the next slide. Brother Abdul Wadud, that will be secondary as well. The next one. I'm sorry, no, yeah, the secondary. So just go back one slide. Yeah. So from the long-term overview, as I mentioned previously, the objective. Sorry, just go back to the slide before. The long-term overview here. These objectives have just been mapped from the statutory guidance. So if you've not joined the previous webinars, I say it'd be a good idea for you to actually go onto the RSE webpage and go through, have a listen to the previous webinars where I've gone through in detail the mapping exercise from going from the statutory content to this long-term overview. So the objectives are mapped onto here, and then just go on to the next page. Then from there, we have, as the writers, as the team, developed some medium-term objectives. So the statutory content gives you an overall objective. Like for example, Spring 2 here, respectful relationships, the responsibilities of bystanders and reporting bullying. So there's an objective from the statutory content around that. What does that look like for us in terms of a narrative? Then you can see that in the medium-term objectives, we kind of expand on that, the way we're going to tackle this, and there will be an Islamic element in the lessons, and sometimes explicitly in the medium-term plans, and sometimes within the lessons. But generally, there'll be there'll be, you know, an Islamic narrative on there. So that's where we go from the long-term overviews to the medium-term plans. So Brother Abdul Wadud, if you carry on to the next one. So again, you've seen this before, the secondary long-term overview, and you have the different modules, essentially: families, respect for relationships, including friendship, online and media, being safe, intimate and sexual relationships, including sexual health. So they're the different modules and color-coded there, and we mapped them into different year groups. As I mentioned previously, it's up to you as schools to decide, you know, where you want to teach. We've put the different objectives in the year groups. Again, it's up to you to be able to decide if you want to, you know, manipulate and move things around. If you felt that actually here's year nine, looking at summer 2, identifying and managing sexual pressure. If you felt actually I wanted to do that in year 10, that you're more than welcome to do that. It's about your school and adapting the scheme to suit your needs. But yeah, if you go through the medium-term plans, you'll see that there's a clear narrative. The narrative that we're going with is that, of course, that, you know, we want to teach RSE, make sure that it's compliant from a statutory point of view, and ensure that it's given from an Islamic perspective. Shall we move on? And again, the lesson plans, I've explained this before. So if you just click through this, Brother Abdul Wadud, you can see that we've got, you know, the 4 elements to the lesson: engage and activate, explore and explain, elaborate and reflect, evaluate and review. And there's the 5E approach. Some lesson, you'll probably, quite a few might have seen that. I've just adapted the 5E approach and made it into a 4-part lesson like this. There's an aim of the lesson objectives and outcomes, key vocab, resources that you need. And then this is one element of the lesson. So this is the evaluate and review part. The teacher notes are there. There are resources to go with it, and the lesson kind of how to teach a lesson is quite, you know, is quite detailed. And again, a lesson plan is a lesson plan. You know, I don't think I've ever taught a lesson from a lesson plan exactly how it is on the lesson plan myself. The lesson plan has to be fitted around the needs of the children, obviously. So one thing we don't have are differentiated resources in our lesson plans, and that's something that we've had feedback from schools regarding this. That's where you as teachers, practitioners, would have to look at the needs of your children, that you may need to differentiate some of the resources. I mean, most of the activities, there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of paired work, there's a lot of group work, but there may be instances, there will be definitely be instances where you will need to differentiate the resources. Someone just asked on the chat as well about PowerPoints. Again, that's been a big, that's been a request from quite a lot of schools about, can we have a PowerPoint to go with it? So these are things that we're getting feedback on, and we understand that things that we may need to develop in the next phase, hopefully, inshallah. And it may be something that the schools may want to engage with us on, you know, supporting us in developing the next phase, inshallah. So that's just a brief overview of the long-term overview, medium-term plans, and the lesson plans. Again, if you want a bit more detail, I suggest you go on to have a listen to some of the webinars from previously. So here's a summary of the RSE scheme as it stands at the moment. I mentioned the 10-step cycle. It's bespoke in the sense that, you know, there was a real need for us to produce an RSE scheme from an Islamic perspective. As I mentioned previously, when I've talked about different schemes, there are schemes out there with a clear narrative. Some schemes are very clear on their narrative of, I would say, promoting certain lifestyles. And there's certain schemes from a particular perspective. So we have the Catholic schools, they have their scheme from a Catholic perspective, but there's nothing out there from an Islamic perspective. And so it's something that had to be written and bespoke in that sense. I mentioned the 10-step cycle regarding you know, ensuring that the lessons of high quality. And yeah, 11 pilot schools. Again, I mentioned that already, that pilot schools have engaged with us, and we're really grateful that they did and give us such valuable feedback and in terms of improving the lessons. And again, we still need that process to carry on as the lessons, as you deliver the lessons in your schools, and you may well raise issues, you may raise, some developmental points, then please get in touch with us and we can incorporate this in phase 4, inshallah. Overall, there's 100+ hours of learning in the scheme. For the primary, there are the 48 primary lessons, which are covered in 39 lesson plans. So some of the lessons are double lessons. And in the secondary, there's 54 secondary lessons are covered in 34 lesson plans. And as you saw on the long-term overview, the lessons, there's not, for every half term, there's a batch of lessons. So in primary, you might just get 1 or 2 lessons over one half term. So autumn term one, you might have 1 lesson, or you might have 2 lessons, up to maximum probably 4 lessons, but no more than that in secondary. Primary normally will just be about 1 or 2 lessons. So again, it's up to you. I had a call with one head teacher a couple of days ago asking how should we deliver this, and they said, what we do is we have a PSHE day every half term. And he was saying what he was thinking was to do part of that PSHE day was to do their RSE. And I said, yeah, I suppose you could do that in terms of set aside a few hours and do your RSE lessons then. I mean, the RSE, one thing about our lessons is they're very content heavy, and we've got that feedback back from some schools to say that there's a lot in there. And again, as a teacher, and as a teacher, I would sometimes take one lesson plan, and sometimes you end up delivering that lesson over 3 or 4 sessions, only because the students, the pupils have taken in a certain direction. You start off a discussion, and suddenly that discussion, you need to give it time, you need to let it allow to, get the real understanding out of it. And you might just end up, out of those 4 activities on the lesson plan, you might end up only doing engage and activate and explore and explain, because the pupils have taken the learning in a certain direction. As a teacher, you're a facilitator. It's not about just, just pouring, like they say, pouring the water into the cup. It's not about just instructing and just making sure you cover the content. It's about getting the children to engage and understand and really value their opinion. I mean, this is an opportunity for us. There are difficult subjects and difficult topics that we need to really engage with our children. And this is the safest place for them to do this, in the school with the teachers. And it needs to be a safe and open space for us to be able to really engage with them and get them to understand the Islamic perspective, what it means, why. The question why always comes up. Why is this? Why can you not have sex outside marriage? Why is this? And those opportunities to have that discussion. Yes, there will be moments as teachers we don't have all the answers, but that's fine. As teachers, you can just say, actually, we'll come back to this one next lesson. This particular point, let's have a bit of thinking about it, and we'll come back to next lesson on this. So in terms of the content, the lesson plans are there. There's a lot of content. You quite easily deliver this over, multiple sessions. So going back to that, the head teacher who mentioned about delivering the lessons in a day on PSHE, yes, that's possible. But that's going to be up to the schools, how they map the lessons and where they map them. Maybe you want to have it over particular RSE days. Maybe you want to incorporate it into your PSHE scheme. Might be full days. That's up to you. And of course, I mean, I've mentioned Islamic content QA. That was really important that we have some, really scholarly input. We're not scholars, so we really appreciated the support that we've got from the scholar panel and their kind of advice. I mean, we've learned a lot. I've learned a lot myself about from the Islamic point of view, different things, and making sure that it's compliant from there. And the last thing is, it says hundreds of hours. It feels like hundreds of months, to be honest. The way the scheme's been going on, mashallah, it's been intense and it's been challenging. But alhamdulillah, when we do see that what we produced, I am quite amazed, alhamdulillah, that we've been able to in about 6 months or so to put together a scheme like this. So alhamdulillah, that's thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we've been able to do this, and we hope that it's a starting point on the journey, and the journey to keep improving and make a real high quality scheme as we work together, inshallah, in the future. Okay, Brother Abdul Wadud, you can move on.
Jazakallah khair, and Ameen to your dua. Okay, moving on, inshallah, and coming towards the end of the session, just want to remind everybody how to access the curriculum. So everybody, inshallah, should by now have their login details. And so you go to the main RSE Hub page, where you find training, click the Watch Now button, that takes you to the login page. Once you're at the login page, you entered your details. You come to this screen here, and here this is where you see your training modules, five training modules we've uploaded, and then towards the bottom you see the primary planning or the secondary planning, depending on what you've bought, that's what you'll have access to. So that was just a reminder for everybody who's not yet accessed it. I would ask you to access the material, the training, share it with your team, keep it within your school setting, please. And inshallah, get ready to start utilizing the material. I'm going to ask Brother Talal to just come back in for a moment and just to talk a little bit about feedback, because feedback is critical and crucial to the development of this curriculum. Back to you, Talal.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. If you want to just, if you have a look at, if you go to the RSE webpage, you'll see these two tabs. So alhamdulillah, we do have a working group. Alhamdulillah, we started our meeting last term with mashallah quite a few leaders, and our plan is every half term, in fact it's going to be tomorrow inshallah, that we're going to have our RSE senior leader working group meetings, and that's an opportunity for us to kind of share good practice. Alhamdulillah, there's a lot of fantastic stuff going on across the country, with the Muslim schools, and so sharing good practice, advice, support, and then also looking at how to improve. That's one way that we will look at how we're going to improve our curriculum is through the working group. So please join those meetings. Inshallah, will be very beneficial. In terms of specifically around the lesson plans, the lesson plan feedback, again, like I said a few moments ago, please, as you deliver the lessons, give us feedback. There's a feedback form that you can click onto. When you click onto that, the tab, the feedback form comes up. Put some feedback in. Advice for improving the lessons, advice for improving the scheme. Again, I just saw a question on the chat, which was that PowerPoints. Yeah, we're aware that we would like to do PowerPoints, but for this particular phase, we thought that it was the challenge to create PowerPoints alongside the lesson plans for this phase was probably, we weren't going to achieve that. So potentially for phase 4, something that we can look at. So yeah, put your feedback in, and inshallah, when you do that, we'll look through all the feedback and incorporate that inshallah into our phase 4. Alhamdulillah, from our side as writers and managers and developers of the scheme, this is just the initial part, putting something together. When it goes out there in the schools and the schools are delivering it, and then you'll be able to dissect the scheme and see, okay, this works really well. This doesn't work so well. Okay, maybe need to look back at restructuring a little bit, or doing this or doing that. And that's the real quality feedback we're going to get from the schools. So we really request that you as your schools are the teachers who are delivering, that you set some time aside to them to be able to do the feedback, and inshallah we'll incorporate that in phase 4, inshallah. Okay.
So moving towards the end of the session, do you want to just share with the group the next steps?
Yeah, so in terms of release, so alhamdulillah, this week, it will be next week actually, we're just doing a QA, the final sweep on the lessons. So next week, inshallah, the lessons will be ready for download from the website, and we'll go through that in a moment, how to do that. And then once that's done, I'll be working on just finalizing the supporting documents to go with the scheme. And those supporting documents are like an introductory documents to the scheme, an introduction to the scheme. There's like a how to use guide. So those of you that have seen the training modules are online, we go into quite a lot of detail. Our trainer, Sister Lena, she goes to a lot of detail how to take a lesson and how to deliver it in the classroom and what to think about, what ethos and atmosphere and rules and to have before teaching the lesson. So it goes in quite a lot of detail in terms of how to do it. But we'll also produce a how to use guide. There will be references of bibliography, particularly around the Quran Hadith references, which our scholars, alhamdulillah, have really in detail helped us produce. So we've got an additional Quran Hadith reference document, and there'll just be an overview guidance document in terms of if there's been any changes that will be kind of highlighted, so that schools know any kind of any edits that might have taken place from the release document. So the supporting documents will be with you, inshallah, in the middle of August. Okay.
Great. Jazakallah khair. So now moving on towards the end of the session, we come to a Q&A. So if anybody does have any questions, please share on the chat, and inshallah Sister Shazia will share with us. And if anybody has raised any questions so far, Sister Shazia, if you want to just share with me and Talal, and we can try and answer as many of those questions as we can.
Yep. So a question that's just been raised is just wanted to know which lessons or group of objectives are parents allowed to remove from?
Okay, in terms of parents and for primary is relationships education. So there won't be any sex education element in the lessons in primary. So there's no kind of withdrawal from primary lessons in our scheme. There may be some schools who are using a different scheme, and if there was any kind of sex education taking place in those schemes, then you'd have the right to withdraw your children from those. At secondary, parents have a right to withdraw their children from the sex education element of the lessons. Now, this is kind of something that we've had from our external review as well. One of our external reviews mentioned that how do we decide which is a sex education part and which is relationship education part? Because in a scheme, in a particular lesson, you may be talking about relationships, but there might be some sex education part into it. I have to say from ours, I mean, alhamdulillah, we've done it. Our scheme is very sensitive. It's very, focused from Islamic perspective, and there's no kind of parents worried about, labeling sexual parts or anything like that. There's nothing like that on there. So I would say that in terms of what objectives parents can withdraw from, we will put something together in terms of any particular lessons where there may be some sex education part in there, and the parents might want to have a look at those, and the schools might want to look at that. But I would say, really, I would say that this is a safe space for us to engage with our children, and it's done in a very sensitive way, where we talked about things like sexual consent, rape, and things like this. We've talked about sexual pressure. These are things that are done sensitively and from Islamic perspective, and they're important for our children to know about. So in summary, I would say that if you can, you should engage with your parents and really get them to see the scheme, see the lessons. And when they see the scheme and the lessons, I hope they will be, satisfied that the lessons are appropriate. But if some parents really wanted to, were insistent that they want to take their children out from a particular, from the sex education part, then inshallah, the supporting documents that we produce, there will be some guidance on that, inshallah.
If I can just add a little bit to that question, the question as well. I think the key is as well is that don't just stop or have a dependency just on this scheme or this lesson plan. I think you as institutions and as leaders need to train, develop your staff to be able to deliver the lessons adequately, manage the conversations in the classrooms, and actually feel confident, because these aren't easy topics at times for teachers themselves to teach. So they need to feel confident, and that confidence needs to come through in the lesson. So there's work that needs to be done just outside of just the lesson plan itself in being able to deliver a really good lesson, inshallah. Any further questions, Shazia?
Yeah, sorry, another one just come in. My understanding is that parents and or pupils, depending on age, can only opt out from the sex education element. If, for instance, there is a data collection lesson in Year 7, pupils cannot opt out from that.
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah. I just mentioned that the relationships part of the lessons. So that's online safety. There's the families, and majority of the scheme all of it in primary, majority of it in secondary. You don't have the option to opt out, but the sex education part you can. But it's not like a lesson. This lesson is on sex education, and this on relationship education. The lessons are kind of, there's different elements to each lesson. So it's going to be quite a challenge to define which part is the sex education part. That's one side. But inshallah, we'll produce some guidance documents for that. The second thing is that within a lesson, if you've got a group of children and you made a safe space for them to discuss topics, they will raise certain topics, certain issues. And really, it's a great opportunity for us to really engage with the children, engage with the students, and really get them to have a space where they can ask these challenging questions, and we're providing answers. If you can't provide answers straight away, we can give some time and come back to it. But I think, you know, it's an opportunity for us to really develop those lessons. So it might be within even any lesson that's taking place, the conversations may go in a certain direction, and we have to be prepared for that, like Brother Abdul would say. But from our side, inshallah, excuse me, we will put a document together, inshallah.
I've just had something come through saying, what would you recommend pupils who opt out do? I've tried to give them similar work, but not the same. For instance, when talking about relationships, I've opted out children a lesson on focusing on their relationship with Allah.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that in terms of, I'm not quite understand the question. They won't be able to opt out on the relationship parts, but if they have opted out on the parents have said they need to opt out from a sex education part, then there's so much that they can do. They can review quite a lot of learning. They can look at previous lessons, the previous work they've done. I mean, we want to embed the learning, don't we? So there's a lot of review elements that need to be done. A lot of things that they can, clarification can be done. So there's so much work that can be done if children opt out.
Shazia, I don't believe there's any other further questions. So if there isn't any, inshallah, we'll move on. Following this, if anybody does have any questions, we do have an FAQ section on the website. And also you can email over any questions to rsc@ams-uk.org. Okay, so moving on, coming towards the end of the session, just to remind everybody, the video inshallah will be uploaded on the YouTube page. And again, there's a lot of other videos on the YouTube page. So what you might find is that just some of the questions that you have and questions that your wider community may have, whether it be parents or community leaders, some of those questions, inshallah, will be answered in these amongst the series of videos that we've put together. As you all know, we have an RSE hub, all things RSE, and inshallah you can download the resources, parent consultation information, sample lesson plans, etc. The Get Involved section, Talal mentioned earlier on, so if anybody does want to, moving forward, get involved in any of the subject leader groups, become a pilot school for phase 4, or get involved in the actual development from the point of view of lesson writing, again, please do share with your team and get involved where you can. These are the events that I mentioned that have been recorded on YouTube. You can access them via our hub. Alhamdulillah, everybody that's on this call today has purchased the curriculum already, so this is just another reminder where you can purchase it from the FAQ section. And that's it, to be honest. So alhamdulillah, I think we've managed to cover most, if not all, the content that we intended to cover. We feel as though we've, alhamdulillah, fulfilled the remit that's been given to us in terms of providing schools a curriculum that meets the statutory requirements and is being built along the lines of our Islamic values and principles. It's not perfect, there is room for improvement. We encourage you to provide us feedback, to remain involved. And inshallah, we too hope to develop a version 2 through phase 4 so that we can carry on perfecting this piece of work. I imagine that this piece of work will be something that will be here for years to come, and it's a space that we hope to be involved in to support our schools. So Jazakallah khair to everybody that's been involved, from the team to the schools that have piloted, through to all the schools that have actually purchased the curriculum. Without everybody's support, I'm not sure we could have got this far. So I pray that Allah gives us success and allows us ease and comfort in terms of getting through some of these challenges, but also gives our children the wisdom to success in their future endeavors. So from everybody at AMS, Jazakallah khair, subhanakallah bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.